Good evening. Welcome back to another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio and powered by our favorite sponsor, TireGet.com. That's TireGet.com. You have to buy tires from somebody, you might as well buy them from us. Help fund the movement, help support the movement. We believe in the freedom of movement. That's exactly what the establishment wants to take from you now. I'm your host, Royce White, here in the belly of the beast, Minneapolis, Minnesota. And this is episode 199. No, it's not. This is episode 200.
Wow.
201, I'm sorry, episode 201. Today we have another incredible HEBROES edition of the Please Call Me Crazy podcast. The great Professor Penn is back in the studio with us. He hasn't been with us since the endorsing convention, the state convention, where I won the endorsement. So we got a lot of ground to cover, but we got some time. I know people have been missing the HEBROES episodes. We've been on two different tracks. Same track, same line of thought, but two different routes.
We've been
since the convention.
We've been busy.
Been busy. Let's start right there. Convention. What'd you think?
What I thought was, going into the convention, I really never thought about winning and losing. I just thought about getting out there and telling the truth, and all the people that I've met around the state over the last several years, and all the people that I've, through the good agency of Dan Schultz and the precinctstrategy.com, who Dan would send people to me, and I'd put them in the party and get them going in the BPOU system. I think back to when I started, how I was really disrespected and really spit on. In fact, ran into a bunch of anti-Semitism in the Republican Party, which was very, very discouraging. And then we showed up there, and it was kind of laid back. It was laid back on the first day. And then the second day in the morning, you showed up, and I looked, and there's like 200 people standing around the table trying to take pictures with you. And I looked over at the Joe Frazier's table. It was empty. And I thought to myself, oh, that's very interesting. But I couldn't get attached to it. I don't get attached to winning and losing. Not in this kind of deal, because we're just about telling the truth. And then we did the deal, and you went up there and gave your speech. And I looked back at the crowd. I was sitting up front, and the place went wild. And I looked at a neocon that was sitting next to me. I said, look back there. And they said, yes. I said, is Royce going to win? And the neocon looked at me and said, I think so. That was the first time that I connected with, wow, success. And then the vote came in, and I'm never going to forget the look on some of those faces of the party stalwarts, because they were so sure that their chosen champion, 26-year naval intelligence veteran Joe Frazier, was going to win. They were sure. They didn't even take you seriously. They just didn't take you seriously. And 900 plus delegates on the first ballot voted for you. And the looks on their faces, I can see it in my mind's eye right now. They were stunned. They were just stunned. My mother used to always say, the best laid plans of mice and men do often go astray. And on that day, they went astray, man. It was fantastic. And and then you won. And what people don't know about Royce was, because I was with him at, kind of on the periphery, Royce started thinking about his grandfather.
Yeah.
And you started crying because, not because you were crying for yourself, but you were having this memory of this man in your life who was a stalwart and a guide and a moral center for you to look back towards. And, you just felt this connection with him, and it just made you cry. And you brought that emotion to the stage for your acceptance speech. And the crowd went wild again. And what the crowd voted for, in my opinion, was peace. I think we're in a moment where, wherever you're listening to HEBROES, whatever state you're in, there's a primary election coming up here. Here in Minnesota, it's the 13th of August. Early voting starts in a couple of weeks, which is a whole other conversation. But the actual election day is August 13th. Whatever state you're in, if you really take a look at who's running in the primary, for whatever primary election it is, there's going to be two candidates. There's going to be a neocon, ex-military, purveyor of the British business model of slavery, drugs, and piracy, wrapped in the cloth of America. And then there's going to be an insurgent candidate who people are going to be running into the ground for whatever reason. Like down in Georgia, Marjorie Taylor Greene has a opponent who is a former brigadier general in the U.S. Army. And every time I see this guy post up, he posts up as, hey, trust me, I'm a brigadier general. And I think to myself, sorry, buddy. I mean, he's got all the necessities. He's black. He's an Army veteran. He's well-spoken, but he's an asshole. That's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
We have too many. We got to start calling these people out for what they are. Because if you're a hammer, every problem is a nail. We're in war. This is war. This is a war versus peace election. And the faster we figure this out, that there are anti-war candidates that are pro-American citizen candidates, and start to identify that, the political landscape is going to get very clear for people. I think. Yeah, I mean, would you agree with me on this?
I think there are a lot of issues that are on the table, but to break it down to the least common denominator, for sure, peace versus war.
There's no peace. What difference do all the other issues
very inconsequential,
right?
Your
dad,
in the
who
grand
cares?
scheme of things,
right?
A nuclear war has a way of
clarifying
the field. Yeah, that's right. But there are a lot of issues on the docket, and I think we've done well to articulate. I think the reason why I won, obviously, I get a lot of practice speaking, right, because of the radio and the podcast, and I've been speaking my whole life. I've been doing interviews and things my whole life, so that's no new territory or ground for me. So I excel when I speak in front of a crowd. But I think the real reason I won was because the message was so simplified down to 3 issues. And those 3 issues, although very rarely spoken about together as sort of inextricably linked, people understand. At least the people in that convention understood that the 3 issues were inextricably linked. The reason I know that is because when I look back through a lot of social media from people who were there and post about what my platform is, they repeat the 3 issues. And it's not a wash, rinse, repeat gimmick. I mean, those really are the 3 issues, right? You can come up with any type of, like Joe Frazier's. I'm sure he has some 3-word issue. Matter of fact, I'm going to tell you what it is right here, because everybody has them. You know what I mean? This is just kind of a staple of American politics. But his is, super corny because he's corny. And, valor, values, vision. And, of course, it's him right there in his military
Hope
uniform.
and change.
Yeah, valor, values, vision. And he's got a red, white, and blue logo. And, of course, the catchphrase or, the 3-term slogan is colored in purple. I don't know if it's for the Vikings. I mean, this is how corny these people get, and that's really what the vote was against. It's being corny. No, I'm serious. I mean, it was just it's the people have had a belly full of it, right? And even if people are kind of corny themselves, they're just tired of corny, and they're tired of like this, manufactured, baked, overly, let's say, marketed, sanitized sort of political message. Valors, values, vision. I mean,
says nothing.
It says nothing. Yeah, I mean, put it in purple and you try and play on, I don't know, the Minnesota Vikings or the purple of moderate politics, and I could just see some crackpot little, weasel dweeb marketing degree, some design major or some consultant,
saying this is the place where you're going to rally because it's a swing state.
Purple is so important. I mean, it's such a powerful color. It's the color of royalty, and it's just all this sort of esoteric, abstract nothingness, right? And it's become part and parcel of our entire society writ large. And this is why I talked about my podcast Wednesday of the emo kids and the goth kids taking over the country. capturing the political zeitgeist. That's more of it right there. I don't care if Joe Frazier's in the military. He might be somewhat tough himself. I don't think so, but he may be. And I'm not knocking his, credentials. But who are you being led by? And we talked about this on the phone the other day, and I was talking about it with Darren Rocher as well, who was in the Army National Guard himself. And this playing on this military and veteran identity is just identity politics from a different spin.
That's a great point because the military builds in its own lobby. And I was thinking about this morning before we hooked up. That great one-liner from Bannon. There are no conspiracies, but there are no coincidences.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody goes into basic training, gets their personality stripped away from them. They get reprogrammed with an ideology. They grow up through the ranks. To go up through the ranks, you got to blend in. It is a life of service. It is a life of giving over to the United States of America, such as it is. And these people come out and we spend $1 trillion a year on pampering these people. I'm pampering them. I mean, it's really a good life. If you survive, you get a nice pension, you get free health care. And guess what? You got to work. I got to work. American citizens got to work. But the military veterans, they can do politics full time because they're on the payroll. So, of course, if you're on the payroll, you want to maintain the payroll. So the thing is a self-perpetuating kind of a lobby. It's a lobby, and you're calling it identity politics. I'm calling it a no coincidences kind of, hey, you got a bunch of people that are trained, they have history. And this is something I've been saying in the Professor Penn podcast a lot. People are going to have a hard time with this, but I don't. I see it very clearly for myself. If I, as an American citizen, kill another citizen, it's murder. It's the worst act one citizen can do to another. It tears the social fabric apart. But if two governments square off and sanction industrialized killing, it's vision and values and valor. It's the taking of murder and elevating it to, a noble pursuit. Yeah, you're still killing people. You're still destroying the fabric of our culture. And you're still reversing the fundamental law, which is to love your neighbor as yourself. We've just never given this a try. I mean, we as a culture have not given a try in my lifetime, and going back all the way to 1913. We haven't given peace a chance. Just this past week, Putin went on television and offered a peace, and he had 4 points of peace. He said that the Ukrainians had to cede the 4 regions in the eastern Ukraine that had allegedly the population had voted to join the Russian Federation. They had to agree never to join NATO. They had to agree never to nuclearize, never to have nuclear weapons, and that the West would drop their sanctions against Russia. And it was a legitimate offer, which was immediately rejected, rebuffed. And Putin, in that same speech, said, if you rebuff and reject this offer, hey, the consequences, the bloodshed, that's on you, not on us. We want to have peace. We're not talking about a ceasefire. We want peace. So for me, my vote for Royce White is a vote for peace in the Ukraine. I don't see the value of that war escalating.
Yeah.
I just don't see it.
There isn't any value.
But, if you go to Joe Frazier,
yeah,
he's clearly for, I think, wasn't he on tape or didn't?
Well, but this is the great gaffe in the entire conservative movement and Republican Party. When I say that it's just another form of woke identity politics, what I mean, I'm not saying it like in the abstract, intellectually. I mean, functionally, that's what it is.
That's a really good, I like that insight.
Yeah, because really this whole idea, what is, when we say identity politics, this notion that multiculturalism is the remedy to human tribal instinct, okay? and we're going to blend everybody together with no boundaries, no borders, no constraints, with no idea to keep us peaceful, with no central idea. And the military industrial complex, the Joe Frazier types, the people who improperly, who misuse their veteran status, their veteran identity, they are defending multiculturalism at the biggest scale. That's what they're doing. And it's not that multiculturalism is bad, it's that the way that it's being carried out, the way it's being pushed is impossible. It's not feasible. It really isn't feasible. It's a pipe dream with no scientific data whatsoever, with no history of evidence that it can work. And it's all a sort of dream. It's an ambition, and it's an ambition with very little credibility, coming from a movement that claims to base their entire political agenda, their entire political platform, their entire political existence on credentials, on validity, on scientific data, on right. But this multiculturalism, and what do I mean when I say the multiculturalism is just propaganda? It's because it has an anti-American edifice,
It's religious.
but it has an anti-American edifice. It has an anti-nation edifice. There, you can't. The only way that multiculturalism can work, the only way that diversity can work, is you can be multiple things, but you have to be one thing together. That's the great intellectual evolution and development of citizenship. That's why I say citizenship may be the most important intellectual development in the history of human civilization. Because the instinct towards tribalism is, I mean, a billion years old or whatever. I mean, it's just, it's micro, it goes down to the microorganisms, groups and hierarchies and tribes. And I mean,
It's a survival strategy.
this is billions of years old. The intellectual uh, evolution of citizenship says, okay, we can all play together, but we have to be one thing together first.
A unifying factor.
There has to be a unifying principle. And the nation, a country, is a great unifying principle. Now, it's not the best. I don't think it's better than faith, but they already pulled the faith out. That's seen as conspiracy theory on its face. Now they're going after the nation. Now they're going after countries in general. A nation is the next sort of conspiracy theory to go. And so, again, multiculturalism works. You have to be one thing and another. Yeah, I'm black, I'm white, I'm a woman, I'm a man, I'm old, I'm young, I'm tall, I'm fat, I'm skinny, I'm disabled, I'm healthy, I'm from China. Doesn't matter. You have to be one thing first. The one thing is American. I'm American and something else. The military-industrial complex is trying to use democracy as an excuse to go around the world and defend multiculturalism. That's the whole and this is what I mean. Joe Frazier can say what he wants. He can dress it up how he wants. David Frum said it exactly as it is. Conservatism is to conserve what is liberal. Said it right there in the debate with Steve Bannon in 2016, and when this whole Donald Trump America First MAGA movement kicked off. Conservatism is to conserve what is liberal. And Joe Frazier, he's wrapping himself in the cloth of the military to defend the same intellectual ideas that came out of the universities that say the only way to have peace in the world is to have
Free, globalized trade.
globalized trade, is to money.
Money.
That the money is the unifying factor.
Right.
Joe Frazier and the neocon, rhino, neoliberal, woke corporatocracy types, they believe that money is the unifying factor. They believe that at bottom, money and resource, which makes them Marxists.
I was just
I
going
mean,
to say
they don't
that.
even, I mean, I don't even know if they realize it, but
They
I
don't.
think
They don't.
But how can you say you're military intelligence and you don't get that? You're not very intelligent. And I'm not saying if you say you're military intelligence, that makes you intelligent. But I mean, come on. I mean, it's scary then. It's scary then that you could even be military intelligence and not get a basic idea. Like, I think they get it. See, I'm much more cynical than most people around this, and I'm getting even more cynical, especially as I interact with these people. I start to realize they're not lacking the information.
They made a choice.
They know exactly what they're saying. They know exactly what they're doing, and they know exactly what they're defending. And they'll just lie. I mean, the logical fallacy in it is so obvious to anybody with half a brain when they run into those people who won't bend the knee to this sort of, warped worldview that's not anchored in reality whatsoever. They just start lying. They'll just lie. And again, their bottom line is money. They think the unifying principle rightfully is money.
Or materialism.
Materialism, that's right. That's a Marxist worldview. And first of all, it's not the unifying principle. And it when it is, it always fails. Because when it's so
When you say fail,
it's failed.
Failed at the
By their
individual,
own admission, it's failed.
at the individual level or at the collective level.
At the collective level.
But it fails at the individual level also.
Absolutely.
That's why it fails at the collective
level. But
it doesn't work.
By their own admission, it's failed. I mean, this is the great political theater that you watch when you turn on Morning Joe. You get one side of the argument of the aisle saying, hey, this is all about resources and the redistribution of wealth and the people that the have and the have-nots and the have-nots need a voice, so we need to tax the rich even more, and the other side of the aisle going, yeah, well, we just need to take more from other people all around the world. We need to defend them, or we need to convince them that our way is the right way, and then people will have more. And again, it all goes back to a unifying principle of money.
Materialism. And
they're Marxists.
And the ante is going up because where the thing is going threadbare, the promise of increasing technology is the shiny object that's supposed to hold the people at bay. Because just around the corner, it's going to get so much better because of technology.
Right.
So they're just doubling down on something that's been failing since the nuclear, the nuclear bomb.
Which is Joe Frazier, Mr. Green Energy. And
only in some venues.
Yes.
This is another thing. We got some people here in Minnesota in the Republican Party, and I'm just going to name a name. Danny Nadeau.
Mm-hmm.
Danny Nadeau. He's in the Minnesota House.
Mm-hmm.
And Danny said at one of my meetings that we have to talk to Republicans differently in different parts of the state. And that's a big part of the establishment's worldview of politics. Yeah. That we have to tailor our message because really we just want to get elected so we can get to the cash. It's all about that materialism. There's no unifying set of principles like citizenship that underlies the philosophy of the party. That's why the party has gotten hollow. That's why over 900 delegates, when you start talking about citizenship, a lot of them didn't know who you were. Maybe half of them didn't know who you were. Half of them came in rock solid for Royce White. Half of them were walking up to me going, who's this guy? I said, well, let's just see what happens. One speech. And you know why the speech worked, Royce? Because you're very real when you talk to people. You have an ability on the podcast, here on HEBROES. You're not fronting.
Yeah, I'm really not.
You're not. So when you go up and
all
talk.
All signal, no noise.
Well, we did this thing up in.
And hold on, I want to say, though, in fairness, it's not wrong per se to think that when you go into different communities that the cultural identity of certain communities, whether it be black, white, professional, sort of inner city, metropolitan, rural, that there's a difference between southwestern Minnesota and up there in the Iron Range, right? I mean, there are different
issues.
There are different issues. There are different communities of people with identities that are well worth acknowledging. I mean, when I was on the David Pakman podcast and the clip just keeps getting replayed and people have now cut it up and made different videos because it kind of creates a stark distinction between two different worldviews. But, I say in it, I'm against the weaponization of identity politics, not taking identity out of politics. You can't take identity out of politics. In fact, if you take the identity out of politics completely, if you lose your identity completely, you're susceptible to tyrants, government subscribing you an identity, which is even more dangerous than having a warped sense of your own identity, right? So I'm not trying to take identity out of politics, but the weaponization of identity politics is to put identity above citizenship, is to put your let's say individual identity above your national identity.
Your grievance above social solidarity.
And which is so ironic because their whole pitch at the broadest range is social solidarity. You can't have social solidarity when you break every issue down to individual identity. I mean, it's not possible. It's actually not comparable.
And then they've weaponized people's grievances such that, and I've been trying to do this. I mean, you even question me, why am I doing it? But it's something I have to go through for myself. I'm actually trying to talk to people that are different than me ideologically.
Mm-hmm.
We can't even get down to the issues. I mean, all I hear is people say,
they don't care.
They don't want to talk about the issues.
They don't care about the
issues.
issues.
Just want to call me names. I mean, and I keep saying, could we get together? Could we sit down and have coffee? Could we talk? Because I like to believe I can talk to anybody. And I'm finding out it's not that true. I can't.
But you can't be discouraged by that, because the loudest ones in the room, the loudest ones that have that sort of visceral, intemperate impulse to respond on X or any other social media platform, with some knee-jerk insult, that's not the average American citizen.
Other people are watching.
Other people are watching.
That's the point.
Yeah, other people are watching who don't have a care in the world about responding, about replying, about how it looks or anything like that. They're watching. People are watching. It's funny because, again, on the internet, the people that I encounter are completely different than the people you encounter in real life. And I would venture to guess, I would bet almost anything that the people who are the loudest on the internet are very quiet in real life. That's a sort of release for them.
Venting mechanism.
A venting mechanism for their introverted nature in real life, right? The internet is become is a kind of catharsis in that way. It's like whoever you are in your real life, you can be somebody different on the internet. What they really don't like, and what those people really don't like about me is I'm the exact same person in real life that I am on the internet. People resent that on both sides of the aisle. I mean, no matter what camp they're in, people resent that part. That's much more fundamental than politics. That's a human condition thing. People hate to see somebody who's the same way, have success, being the same, and that's what the mainstream media is saying. And really, the funny part is the entire mainstream media has been washed in that edifice of a sort of repressed representation of who they wish they were on the internet, right? I mean, that is the edifice of the entire mainstream media, from Morning Joe all the way down to your local Star Tribune writer. I get to be somebody different when I present content to the public. I get to be somebody else than I really am in every day. And so for a person who has success being who they actually are, I resent that. I resent that Royce could say the word cuck and 900 Republican delegates still take him serious. And then they'll say, oh, well, we didn't know that he used the word cuck. But when people find out that I use the word cuck, they support me even more. And then they just turn to say, well, all of those people are crazy. No, those people are not brainwashed in this sort of, cosplay of American or Western elitism, pashti, cosmopolitan, presentation.
We've talked about that a lot, and what I'm noticing, my producer, when we started the Professor Penn podcast, I said, now we can't call me Professor Penn. My producer said, yeah, we're going to call you Professor Penn because you know a lot and it sounds right. And I run into all these people. I'm constantly telling people it's a stage name. It's not a big deal. Come to the podcast. You're going to see there's a lot of information there. People are focused on tearing down my misuse of the word professor in their view, as if professors are so sanct That's the part, because I grew up in that academic world, and I could have walked into a university and gotten a job.
Right.
Why didn't I
No, it's
do
the
it?
same thing they say. Wait. It's the same thing they say about being a senator. It's the same exact thing. They say, "Oh, well, you're running for Senate. Real becoming of a Senate candidate." It's like they hold, and this is a really big issue. We have these positions in our society, like being a professor or being a politician or
Doctor,
being a doctor or being a
credentialized,
lawyer.
credentialized.
We have this crisis of credentialization where, and the crisis isn't necessarily the people who are credentialized, although that's a crisis as well. The real crisis is that we all know that their credentialization is a sort of false catharsis where we don't even want we want people to be a prop that in so many ways we know has no real chance of changing the status quo. Like
People don't want the status quo to
we
change.
like the idea that a doctor or a lawyer or a politician or a professor are supposed to be the vanguard, the safeguard, the litmus test, the protector, the purveyor of sanity and reason and logic. We want to believe that. But deep down we know. Let's make sure we pick people that at the farthest reach won't take it too far. 'Cause we like the convenience. We like the convenience. And that's why you have politicians that are ridiculous. Like Kamala Harris, she's ridiculous. Nancy Pelosi, and pick some. It's not just them. I could pick some from either side. They're ridiculous. But they're a reflection of us. That's what we want. That's
We want the post World War II
yeah, we
Democrat
want a guy. We
liberal
want a guy.
order.
We want a guy to run for Senate who's going to say everything and nothing. And I'm not saying we as in the broad society. I'm saying historically speaking, before the advent of the MAGA movement and Donald Trump, and in small pockets of people who are, let's say, particularly involved in political activism. Overwhelmingly, these people really want to preserve the status quo. They'll pick a guy who will present himself as wanting things to be different, but show no real signs of making any difference or willing to challenge
Well, it's
anything
like
to make
Joe
a difference.
Frazier.
Right.
He's good on the border. Talks
He's
about
not
the
good
debt.
on the border, though.
No.
But,
No. He says he's going to fix the border.
Yeah.
He says he wants to deal with the debt, but we have to have peace through strength. And those three ideas are linked together.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're in 172 countries, we, the people, our military, we don't have a border.
Right.
How are you going to pay for it? Deficit spending. So all three issues are really one issue, which is the endless war. That's why I say it's a peace versus war. There's many sub issues to deal with that in terms of policy. But if you don't get the superstructure right, peace or war, who cares? Because as long as we're all over the world running an empire, we're not going to have a border because the border is no more. There's no country.
There's no boundaries.
There's no boundaries, and then there's no boundaries personally.
Which is odd. I mean, I can't even square. And I said this to you the other day. Can you imagine me just walking into Canada? Just going on up to northern Minnesota and just going right on across the Canadian border and, ambitions to live in Toronto with no documentation? Can you how do people even, and that's what, I try and keep myself open to thinking about geopolitics in a way that's not American centric, even though I'm saying America first, if you know what I mean.
Right.
You still have to have the perspective of how other countries and other people are looking at things, right? I'm not an American supremacist. Okay, I think we should take care of our people first. But I'm aware that other people must have a different perspective, which is partly why I'm not willing to concede that Vladimir Putin started this war when we put weapons right up on his border. Now we got Russian submarines off of our coast, and people are looking like, well, what are we doing? Well, I mean,
it's war.
We're in war, tit for tat. But I try and keep an open perspective. But this sort of thing makes me believe it really is more aimed at America than anything else, right? Because this whole immigration border worldview is completely and utterly illogical by any standard. There is no way that, and look, I don't know if they're letting illegal immigrants into Canada because they might be.
They are.
Okay,
They are.
but
And the European countries,
but they're not. But guess who they're not letting in?
China and Russia.
No. Guess who they're not letting into Canada?
Who's that?
Black people. There ain't no. There ain't no. You understand what I'm saying?
Go ahead.
There really is a black and white divisive black and white narrative that is sort of wrapped around and confused or entangled and manipulated when it comes to geopolitics, race, ethnicity, immigration, identity. It's one big Gordian knot. But when you really start to pull at the threads, the whole thing unravels very quickly.
Well,
If you say
piece,
that the country, that America is a morally corrupt nation since its inception, that it was founded on white supremacy, that the nation is in a crisis for black people, that black people can't live here without being oppressed or hunted or mistreated, then why doesn't Canada, which carries a very similar philosophy in their executive, at their executive level of government, why doesn't Canada just open up its borders to black people? Why can't black people flee? If the citizens of the South American nations are facing a humanitarian crisis because of despots and warlords, then why aren't black people seen as facing the same crisis living under white supremacy here in this country?
Oh, you mean the black people here in this country should go to Canada?
Yes. Why? Why can't we? Why doesn't Canada allow black people to just come across their border into Canada? You see how if you pull a certain thread, you can see the whole thing unravel?
Well, the one thing that you're not saying that needs to be said is that if you look at
I don't even
policy,
think people understand. I don't even think people understand what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if you're from anywhere in South or Central America, now China, even Afghanistan,
Palestine,
all of these places. I mean, there's people coming from all over the world. Syrian. I mean, you could be from anywhere in the world, and wherever you are that isn't America is seen as being in such a crisis, it justifies you
Come
being
on,
an
come
illegal, undocumented immigrant. Yet the people who live here in America that they claim are oppressed and living under racism or whatever other form of injustice, those people, because they are American citizens,
don't seem to want to leave.
they don't seem to want to, they are not allowed to. This is why we say at the podcast, they want to limit your freedom of movement. You know, I mean, you understand? If you're an American citizen, you can't go anywhere. You have nowhere to go.
I get it.
You can't go live in Europe. You try and go live in Europe without documentation.
If you're an American citizen.
If you're an American citizen.
Right.
Try to go live in Australia without documentation if you're an American citizen. I mean, live there. Try knocking on the door of the federal government, going down to your local municipality office, the county office, whatever jurisdictional, things they have in those other countries. I don't know, counties or whatever. Go to your local county office, like Hennepin County here, and say you want government assistance, and you are an illegal immigrant in Canada. You want money. Not only are you here illegally, you want money. I want you black people who believe in this woke liberal ideology to pack yourself a fucking lunch, get in your car, get you some gas. Let's try it. See, I'm about that type of that
An
action.
experiment.
An experiment, a political experiment. Let's get a black caravan from the Twin Cities going. Let's get a caravan of black folks.
10, 15,000.
Just a little political experiment. Hey, Joe, you want to give us a national, Juneteenth. Let's get a little political experiment going here. How about 20,000 black people here in the Twin Cities? we'll take some other people from some other places too, because I mean, first it was Mexican immigrants are being tyrannized by drug lords. Okay, then it was Guatemalans, and whoever else. I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's all one big place. There's nothing more xenophobic and racist sort of than saying that everybody down there is kind of dealing with the same sort of issue. I mean, you savages down there in South and Central America, you're just all dealing with the same set of life circumstances when you really get down to it. Okay. So let's just take any neighboring black folks too. You're in Waterloo, you're in Milwaukee,
Join the caravan.
you're in Chicago. Join the caravan. Let's just take a day drive in a caravan up to the Canadian border and tell the Canadian Border Patrol that we're all living
we're seeking asylum.
We're all living under white supremacy, and we would like to seek refuge in Canada. And then if we're successful in getting past the border,
this is hilarious.
Let's go to the nearest Canadian municipality building
and apply for help
and apply for money and housing. You wouldn't make it past the border. You're not making it, which is mind-blowing to me that black people would still vote Democrat because the policies so obviously don't apply to them. You can't do with that. You're not allowed to. Seriously.
That's funny.
I mean, and my question is, if I drive up in a car, does that disqualify me? Does that mean I'm above the imaginary threshold of what constitutes a humanitarian crisis or a financial economic crisis in my own personal life if I have a car? How about if I bike up? But if I run up with 10 people on foot and I cross a river or jump over a wall, all of a sudden I'm legitimate? I mean, it's just so shallow. And my point, again, to go back to Joe Frazier, is these are the things that real leaders, real politicians should be talking about. The contradiction. You can't have a one thing unifying factor like citizenship if you don't sort out the contradiction. If you let the contradiction manifest and then metastasize, that's what they're doing. And both sides are to blame equally. Now, the both sides is the part that obviously, should be, distinguished. And there are two distinguishable sides within both sides, right? It's just that all three of them are against our side. You take your far leftists who want to occupy Wall Street, the Bernie Sanders, socialist, populist types, and their unifying factor is they don't believe in God. They see God as a remnant of white supremacy, right? So, everybody sort of it goes the far left, the center of left Democrats, and then you got your, fake posing Republicans like Mark Cuban, right? I mean, Mark Cuban is that typical sort of, right of center,
centrist,
economic business Republican. I want low taxes. And just the other day, he says, "Oh well, I can't vote for anybody who doesn't believe in climate change." I mean, and he's not a stupid guy. This is how I know these people aren't just ignorant. They're in on it. We are starting to realize that they are in on it. When MSNBC celebrates, all but celebrates Steve Bannon being thrown in a higher level prison with violent offenders for a crime that's obviously nonviolent, we are beyond giving people the grace that they're ignorant. And once you cross that line, Joe, Mr. I don't like your language online, Mr. War Hero, you're a warrior? Are you a warrior? Or did you come up in a sort of posh, sophisticated, technology-driven prosperity of American military where people are killed with buttons, where people are killed, and don't get me wrong, people who are in Afghanistan and Iraq, there was some real getting down and fighting. There was some real gunfights out, in those places. and we lost a lot of soldiers, and we shouldn't have been there in the first place. But we didn't lose nearly as many soldiers as we did in previous wars because the technology is so good, because America's military has such advantage. Now and that says a lot too because we still really lost those wars. So it kind of proves the theory that the rise of technology and the advancement of military on paper doesn't necessarily equal winning. But my point is, Mr. War Hero, they've crossed the line now with weaponizing the court, and we're supposed to still be cordial. We're supposed to still be civil. We're supposed to still talk like everything is okay. Is that what they do in the military? Is that what they do at dive school there in the Navy? Are the drill sergeants, are they cordial? Are they nice? See, so even the people in the military have this sort of indoctrination of one thing for one set of people and another thing for another set of people, or for another time and another place. And if I'm a politician that came from the military, it's like Julia Coleman, Norm Coleman's daughter.
Daughter-in-law.
Daughter-in-law, yeah, Norm Coleman's daughter-in-law. Dummy. In the state house, state representative, probably convinced a bunch of Republicans in her district that, she's the right one for the job because she has the run of the mill cookie cutter view on a bunch of Republican issues that you could go to any Fox News segment and find and repeat. A real wash, rinse, repeat. And the country's full of them. But when they start talking, you know exactly who they are. And Julia Coleman had the audacity. She had the audacity to say I shouldn't use the word cunt. Like, that's beyond the pale. That's too far. And then she used her own children as an example. She goes, if one of my 3 boys, who are toddlers, by the way, if one of my 3 toddlers used that word,
they're going to military school.
They'd be off to military school before they could apologize. First of all, I'm a grown man, and this is the crisis of femininity due to a failure of masculinity, because when women talk like this, men don't stand up and say, are you dumb? That's seen as, improper. But yet we're going to let these people lead our government? And I'm not just talking about women, I'm talking about anybody. But the point is, we are very hesitant to challenge women in our society.
Well, there's a challenge coming up for them. You know what that is?
Well, but again.
But there's a solution to this problem.
Again, Julia Coleman says that she uses her 3 boys as an example. I'm a grown man. And this is a sort of cultural, psychological issue where women, as a broad group, especially in the political ether, have sort of infantilized the rest of men and the rest of America and politics. I'm a grown man. The words that I choose to use shouldn't be bound by the expectation of what we would hear out of children or even teenagers that are still under their parents' authority. There's a clear distinction between grown adults and children. And the second part of that whole line of thinking is, why does she believe that military school is where people go, where kids go, where young men go to be less exposed to profanity? These are posh, mealy-mouthed, cosmopolitan Republicans that have no clue how the real world works. And the Joe Frasers of the world that actually went to those places, they know better. They're so interested in their own professional, political, economic expediency, they're willing to go along with the lie. The Joe Frasers are willing to smile in the Julia Coleman's faces, knowing full well what she's saying makes no sense whatsoever for his own political expedience. These are the crooks that destroyed this country. These are the idiots and the crooks that killed this country. When Steve Bannon talks about the feckless conservatives, these are the feckless conservatives that killed this country, that gave the country over to the Democrats, that sat by, smiled, knew better, as the Nancy Pelosi's racked up 35 years of corruption in the U.S. Congress. While the courts and the district attorneys played fast and loose with jurisprudence and precedent for whatever political gain in whatever area of the country, which is different all over the country. These are the people who killed freedom. And it's not a nothing issue. I mean, even that right there, and I think people don't, and what I was saying earlier is people don't like politicians that really take shit serious. I take it serious. What I say online is serious. If I say cuck, shut the fuck up, I'm serious. I may be saying it flippantly, but I'm serious about the belief. You know, the foundational worldview is you're not serious. You don't want to talk about facts. I'm not obligated to engage with you. In fact, I want to just let you know I don't think you're serious in the most visceral way possible. Shut the fuck up, cuck. Simple. That's unstatesmanlike. But you could be a House representative if you're a young woman who's attractive, because Julia Coleman, she's relatively attractive, and you got a stepfather who's considered political royalty in many ways here in the state of Minnesota. As long as you fit that criteria of identity, okay, then you're good to be a politician and lead the country, and you actually have worldviews like going to military school would lessen your chance of using profanity. You don't know how war works. So how can you be involved in House resolutions that take opinions and uh, positions on matters of war? You have no fucking clue how war works. Joe Frazier does. But you see how they're willing to come together at the drop of a dime to preserve the public not seeing the truth. She knows she doesn't know anything about war or military school. She knows that. She's just talking. She's just talking. Joe Frazier knows she doesn't know anything about how the military really works. Their unifying factor has nothing to do with patriotism. It has nothing to do with a love for the veterans. It has nothing to do with American citizen security. It has nothing to do with the morality of Christianity or Judeo-Christian principles. It has nothing to do with Israel. It has to do with money. Their money. Your money. Everybody's money. It has to do with preserving the money, which is why I led people to the Fed. I don't give a shit about any of these other issues. Let's talk about the way the money works. And it's the one thing that the mainstream media continues to fail to talk about. And as I watch them do it, I'm just going to triple down. Every speech, if they put Steve, we're going to the Fed regardless. We're going to create, the summer's here, we're going to create a revolving protest, peaceful protest outside the Minneapolis Fed. Put it down on the list right now. That's the next thing. All of you, I want to see who's who. Everybody from around the state of Minnesota that really understands how politics work in this country, we're going to the Fed. I'm sick of all the other bullshit wedges. It's all bullshit. It has its place. I'm not saying it's nothing. Transgender strip shows for children, it's a perversion, but it's way downstream. The status quo that was preserved to allow that norm to rise stems back to the money. The reason why people turned a blind eye and didn't stand up was for the money. And it's not just individual greed. It's socialized greed. Our entire political worldview in the West is that the unifying factor is money. This is Henry Kissinger's work. That you can avert war through money.
Get everybody on the payroll.
Well, sure you can, but you have wars of different kinds.
It didn't work. No. Well, it didn't. That you get into the linchpin of it, which is the Holocaust. So the whole point of the international trade architecture and this way the money works, as you're saying, is supposed to be a bastion against a world war. But it failed because other countries have risen up and have challenged the hegemony of the post-World War II Democrat liberal order. And they're called illiberal. That's what the pundits call an Orban or a Xi or a Putin. They're illiberal. But they're not illiberal. They're doing their own culture, whatever it is. And we're labeling these people as not being correct because we've fallen into one of the greatest traps a group of people can fall into, which is my culture is the truth and yours is a myth. So we're calling all these other cultures substandard. And we're willing to go to war to maintain this liberal democracy, this post-World War II liberal democracy. But you were talking about Julia Coleman in the military school,
Yeah.
and I see an opportunity forming up on the horizon, because even in the darkest of clouds, there's a silver lining, because we have now equality. We do have which I think is an admirable thing, which is an equality of, which is a kind of an offshoot of multiculturalism. If it was anchored in citizenship, it would be a beautiful thing, because what we're doing is we're working out of the Constitution and the protections of the Bill of Rights and the spirit of the Declaration that all men are created equal, and women. And now we have this equality. But it's not really equality. We're getting men, I'm going to speak for myself, I'm getting pounded down. In my own camp, I got people saying, we don't need men. I don't need you. You need me, I don't need you. And I look around, and that's everywhere.
Right.
I'm seeing it. I'm even seeing it.
Women have gotten mouthy.
Okay. So just this last week, the House passed in a defense appropriations bill, which will probably not pass in the Senate. They're going to have to argue about it. But they are going to go to a mandatory database of selective service registration for all men. Just men. Just men.
Wait, what?
There's been a selective service administrative function where men can voluntarily register for the draft at 18 years old. But it wasn't getting the job done because, of course, nobody voluntarily registered themselves. So now, using the database of Social Security, they're going to automatically, or at least this is the legislation that passed the House, that will eventually pass the Senate, and will eventually be signed into law, that every man at 18 years old is going to be automatically, using technology, registered for the draft. But not women. Not women. I find that a little offensive, because we're equal. Why do I, or my son, because if I was young, I would go, why would my son have to go, but not my daughters? But on the playing field, we're all equal.
They're not equal. We're not equal.
We're not equal. That's my point.
But all men were created equal. Doesn't mean that they live equally, and it doesn't mean that they die equal.
No, but my point is this, Royce. If
I know your point. It's a lie.
It's a lie. The
equality,
but it's beyond that. Women are voting with the globalists because the globalists are representing their interests until they have to go to war. Then maybe they're going to be nationalists. When their ass is on the line, like my ass is on the line or your ass is on the line, maybe they'll think about what wars they're going to, what globalism they're supporting. Because right now, they got a free pass. They get both sides of the football. And that never works when you're playing on both sides of you just got to pick a side. So if you're able to get a free pass, if you're equal, but you get to send men to war,
right?
That's not right.
No, that is called female exceptionalism. That's what it's called.
Well, that's going to be a revolt right there.
That's
one way or the other.
That's what this is becoming.
Either the men are going to revolt.
I mean, what about this again? When geopolitics aside, let's go back to the local. Let's go back to their entire criticism of me right now is centered around a feminist sort of ideology. And my primary opponents are more than willing to push that same ideology. Like right now, I'll give you an example of sacred honor. I'm in a primary. I'm being primary. I'm in a primary election season campaign against Joe Frazier. If a woman came out and accused Joe Frazier of raping her with little to no evidence, I would not support using it to try and go after his image or to speak about his candidacy in any ill way. I just wouldn't use it. One, because I know the ethos of it. Now he could be guilty of it, But to use it in the political arena is to concede, number one, that it's true, which is un-American. And to see them say, well, you owe back child support without any real evidence, there's no evidence of the position they're trying to take on the back child support. Their position, actually probably rooted in a bit of racism, but their position is you just chose not to pay. That's not true at all. Or it's you said women were too mouthy, so you're a misogynist. Or it's your divorce filing has your ex-wife, your then ex-wife, saying that you were abusive, which is probably the most common tenet of the public the public presentation of the dynamic between men and women in relationships all across the country. Every woman who breaks up with her boyfriend has to say that he was abusive online for whoever she thinks is watching. There's always a reason why we broke up. Well, it's either that or that swings both ways, right? And we'll talk about American cuckery in a minute, but seriously, because again, people think it's a nothing issue. They kind of look at the sexual dynamic and laugh like, this guy's not serious because he's talking about these things, cucks and women being mouthy. And no, the sexual politics are the undergirding
That's the
of
core.
the power structure.
That's the core.
Yeah, that's what they're using to control the narrative and manipulate the strings of politics. The sexual politics dominate the political arena. That's why the Democrats like Amy Klobuchar is in a conversation about Joe Biden's cognitive ability, his mental sharpness and his mental fitness, and she goes immediately to talk about him defending women's health care. Sexual politics. Let's not talk about the president freezing or falling off stage or falling asleep at a global summit with world leaders. Let's go back to women's health care and abortion.
And access to contraceptive care.
But it's really sexual politics. I mean, it's about the sex.
It's divisive.
It's intentional. And my point is, their whole attack on me is really, you're just toxically masculine. You're just a toxic man. You got no respect for women.
But pick up a gun and go to war.
And we're not equal. There are more men in the military than there are women by a landslide. It's not even close. There are far more men in the United States military than there are women.
Don't you think that this hierarchy of politicians that are espousing the equality?
Before I go, Joe Frazier and his crew are totally willing to fall in line with this way of thinking.
But don't we demand as American citizens that since we are going to have equality, that we have equality? Wouldn't this bring about a crisis point on the ideology?
No.
Where women? No, I think women, if they were
No.
faced, if women were, you think they're going to go to war?
No, they're not. You got to realize the sophistication and manipulation of the beta male cucks who are using women to execute their political agendas. They're not going to let it go that far. They'll accept the tyranny before they pull the mat. They got to make sure all the alpha males are dead first.
That's not a happy
They got to
prescription.
clean out. They got to clear out all the alpha males before they pull that move. Loki has to kill Thor before he wreaks tyranny on the rest of Asgard. Because as long as Thor's around, he's dropping that hammer. As soon as Loki gets to acting up, doing a little, I'm coming in. Once Thor's out of the way, now he sits on the throne. Now he claims Odin's throne. Now he's the guy. And then you see a form of tyranny that you thought Thor with this sort of brash and what they call knuckle dragger, Neanderthal sort of traditional male personality. You thought that was tyrannical.
Just wait
until you get a psychopath who's not bound by the constraints of real masculinity,
sacred honor.
Then you get to really see, and that is what we're headed towards. But I got to go back to this whole Joe Frazier thing, and it's not just Joe. It's Norm Coleman. It's Tim Pawlenty. It's Rudy's not even really in it. I don't know what they told Rudy. Okay. Who knows what they told Rudy? Rudy's 90 years old. Okay.
Do you know Rudy's a fellow on the Council for Foreign Relations?
Of course. Makes perfect sense.
Let's not make Rudy too old to know what's going on.
Well, he's old. How old is he?
93.
Come on, that's old. I don't care how smart you are. When you're 93, you're struggling. Everybody's struggling at 93. It's not wrong to say you're struggling at 93. It's like Bill Burr said about being 50. Stop going and get plastic surgery on your face when you're 50. You didn't get fucked. You're 50. Nobody fucked you. You're just 50. Would you rather look like a normal 50-year-old person or a 25-year-old gecko? Right? So, just nature, time. Rudy's old. That's just what it is. My point is all of them agree on this edifice. And it's really that when it comes to sexual politics, when women are involved, the facts no longer matter. The assumption, how it looks, is more important than the reality. It's something we've accepted culture-wide based on a corporate mentality, branding, marketing. It's not about the reality. It's about perception. That's a common saying, right? It's not about what's true. It's about what you can prove.
So in other words, the contradiction can continue unfettered?
Absolutely. That's what they're preserving. That's what they're trying to preserve. That's why they have to warp the identity. That's why they have to change what it means to actually be a woman. That's why they have to try and confuse the dialogue so that the contradiction can kind of squeeze through. They're just creating a bunch of noise so the contradiction can squeeze through. And anybody who stands up and goes, wait a minute, that doesn't line up, those are the people that they're going to try and take out.
Oh, well, I'm going to say it again then, because I believe in equality. I believe in equality, and I believe that men have to be aware of their behavior around women. And this is a coming of a higher level of consciousness amongst men my whole life. I came of age in the early 70s. And I remember in the 60s, it was not uncommon. In fact, it was common to go to a party and a woman would show up with a black eye. And that's been really turned into very abhorrent behavior, which it wasn't before the 70s, before this consciousness raising. But now we're going to have a draft. It's coming because we're going to war. Mm-hmm. If we don't get peace candidates in, we're going to war.
Right.
So we're just going to send men to war, but women and men are equal? I'm going to be on that one.
No, they're going to, and their response is going to be, you should want to go to war to protect women, you coward.
I'm a coward. I want you to be right there with me, baby. Yeah. Come on.
No, and that's
because we're equal. Well, aren't we equal? Why do I have to die and we're equal? Because, all I kept hearing is, I hear this a lot, physical doesn't matter. Intellectually, emotionally, we're actually stronger than you. Oh, really? You mean my physical doesn't matter? Okay, my physical doesn't matter. I agree. I can't act out physically. But now my country's at risk, or someone else's country's at risk. To make it really clear, someone else's country is at risk, and now I have to go? Just myself? That's a contradiction I can't swallow. If we're equal, we're equal. Because what I'm looking for is a mechanism by which women have to reevaluate their political affiliation. You're laughing at me. You're laughing at me.
Well, and we can't even say women broadly, because a lot of women voted for Donald Trump. A lot of women support Donald Trump. They just want to make it seem it's all noise. It's all noise. There's a lot of women out here that know it's bullshit. There's a lot of women out here that aren't buying, that aren't drinking the Kool-Aid. I don't even, again, they're great at controlling the narrative. They're great at manufacturing consent. They're great at creating the presentation of consensus. I don't buy it one bit. I'm just not buying it. My mom's a prime example. Grew up in a culturally Democrat community. She's not buying it. I showed her a drag stripper show with little kids there. She was mortified. She says, "What is this?" Same thing with your secretary who hadn't seen it before.
Oh, Carrie, she didn't even know it existed.
She was horrified. What? What is this? No, this is common. This is going on. This isn't a one-off. So, the the logic in it becomes obvious. So again, we're in war. This is a full blown, full contact war right here in the political arena with the most corrupt people you could possibly imagine that have no desire to tell the truth and hold a line of sacred honor whatsoever. No desire. Why are we going to be polite? Why would I be polite? For the presentation of what my other fellow comrades think of me? I'm just holding form because of what people think?
That's actually one of the greatest uh, shockers for people, because when you're actually in front of a crowd, you're actually quite friendly and you don't swear. And
I am friendly.
You are.
In general.
You're friendly.
I am friendly until I'm faced with fucking communists. I'm very friendly. I'm a very nice guy.
So your theory of the case, or what you're saying is the niceties of our elected politicians, our conservatives, have allowed the communists to advance.
It's obvious. It's not my opinion. It's clear.
So the conservatives are so shocked when a guy like Bob Good loses in Virginia last night.
Yeah.
They're shocked. They're horrified. They don't understand what's happening.
Right.
Conservatism has failed. We got to put it in the ground. It's failed. It's a failed ideology. That's what I say.
Right.
It's failed. Why has it failed? Because it's conserving the post-World War II Democrat liberal order. These people went left when some of us went right. I want to conserve 1776.
Right.
And I think Alex Jones said that. He was saying it 20 years ago. And people are going, "Oh, he's a white supremacist."
Right.
Right?
Right.
No, what he was saying was...
No, I had somebody tell me that I'm a white supremacist. Said anybody who supports Donald Trump is a white supremacist, and white supremacy is a tool that can be used by anybody.
Well, that's nice. That must be an educated person.
Yeah, of course.
That person graduated from the university.
The liberal arts.
Of course he did.
The social sciences.
Those same people, when they hear I'm Professor Penn, and I said, well, I'm not really a professor, it's a stage name, they can't get by it.
Yeah.
They're not interested in the ideas.
The university is their religion.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That is the religion.
Yeah.
That's the point.
Academia.
Secular humanism is a religion. That's another thing that crept up on us that we haven't paid attention to. It has all the hallmarks of a religion, like you were just talking about the multiculturalism. There's no data to back up that it works. They just believe in it. That'd be called a religion. Right?
Right.
Right. So you have a choice. You can believe in multiculturalism, or you can believe in a 5,700-year tradition. Hey, you pick them. Right?
In what world can you have a bunch of different people live in the same place with no common interests?
They will fight.
They will kill each other. It's not, I mean, why are we even arguing? I mean, but again, you get to a point where you start to think, why am I even asking about the logic anymore? And once you finally get to see, there's all these people that still believe in this sort of logical back and forth.
The niceties.
That's fine. We can talk logic. We can talk philosophy with people who are willing to talk logic and philosophy. Some of these people have no root in reality. And Joe Frazier's one of them. There are conservatives and the neocons are in the same group.
I like that point that you made, that the whole military lifestyle is its own kind of identity politics. That's a really good... Boy, when we spread this one out, some people's heads are going to blow off their shoulders, because some of these people are pretty intelligent. They're going to look at that. They're going to say, wow, that's true. I've wrapped myself in an identity, and I'm using that identity as a sledgehammer, and that's not American. That's anti-American in and of itself. And why do I say that? Because military empire and the concept of America from 1776 can't coexist. There's no coexistence between... The whole point of the country was anti-empire. The whole point of all of our founding documents was anti-empire. We were anti-imperialist, anti-empire, anti the crown, anti all the things that we seem to be trying to preserve as... But I say this in my meetings. I've said this many times. Go to these meetings. Well, we've been there. Remember that one guy, Joshua, we'd go there and there were 30 people in there. You'd fight with them. Everybody beat on him. And then this is a long time ago, and I'd feel bad because the guy's taking an ass whipping, and everybody's picking on the guy. So I'd say, raise your hands if you voted for George W. Bush. And everybody's hand would go up. And I'd say, see, you just never know when people are going to realize that what we believed was a scam. We're waking up from it. Now, you young people, you woke up into a perversion. You maybe figured it out a little bit quicker than some of the older people did, because the older people, my generation, we got the benefit, first of all, of the 60s and the 70s, where there was a little bit more sacred honor and a little bit. Of course, Kennedy kind of canceled that, the death of Kennedy, but there was an argument to be made in that period for what was going on politically in the country. But when we got to the Vietnam War, that argument was over. And so now we're at a time when people are recognizing this in their own time frame. And I try to talk to conservatives, and I say all the time, every nationalist is a reformed conservative if they're of my generation. Look at Steve Bannon, how far he's come just since we've known him, how much even the leaders of the movement have become more clear about the failure of conservatism, about the failure of the military, about the failure of the whole edifice. So we're at an inflection point where I think these conservatives, and I see it on X, they're feeling pretty isolated. And I say to them, could you please evaluate what you believe? Go back and read the founding documents of the country. I'm thinking about this person I communicate with, Reese, down in Florida. She's got a big following. She calls herself Reasonable as her handle. She's a conservative. She's ex-military. She doesn't recognize that she's conserving liberalism. She just doesn't get it. And because she shouldered a gun voluntarily as a volunteer, as a kind of a mercenary in a way, she got paid to go fight with the army. She feels that she knows more than everybody else about how things work. Actually, she was just preserving the empire. She's not preserving America. Boy, when are these people are they ever going to figure this out? Are these military people going to figure out that what they're preserving?
They're already figuring it out, and that's another misrepresentation.
Okay.
They all get represented as as a monolith. I'm not doing that. I'm not saying all military people.
We had all those military. That was one of the best things about that convention.
Yep.
I started seeing these people. There was a guy. I got his number. I got to call him. He went out of town.
Purple Heart.
He had the Purple Heart hat on and the Royce white T-shirt on.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked up to him and I said, "Tell me your story." And then all of a sudden we had a bunch of people.
Vietnam.
That were ex-military, served, combat, wearing Royce white shirts. And
Right.
One of them was a colonel, and he looked at me and he said, "I just retired. It's a scam."
Right.
Wow.
Not a monolith. See, the great weapon of identity politics is not that the natural consensus from the identity groups is really a consensus. The weapon is to
make people think
there's a consensus amongst that identity.
People do that. It's a cognitive distortion.
Yes.
Everybody thinks that.
Yes. If you don't vote for me, you're not black. Men are useless.
Or if you don't vote for me, you're not Jewish.
Same
idea.
Men are useless. Anna Navarro says it. Joy Behar, Whoopi Goldberg laugh, which is intended to be a sort of staged representation of a multi-ethnic
agreement.
Panel. Yeah,
right,
women's
right.
panel. And then you got a crowd of faceless people who you can't see, but you assume they're women because you kind of got a feminine tone. When you get a crowd of people,
we don't even know if they're there. It could be a clap track.
They're there, and they got three people in the at the talk shows. There are people in the crowds that give you cue cards of when to applaud and when to laugh. Do you know that?
Yes, I do.
Because I actually been on a few of those talk shows where they have a live crowd, live audience, and they hold up cue cards of when to clap and when to laugh.
It's creepy, isn't it?
That's weird.
It's creepy.
That's weird.
That's creepy.
But that's the Truman Show that we've created. And I want to go back to this. The child support thing. It's so indicative of the narrative, how we think, what we've conceded.
The materialism of having kids, for starters.
I want to tell the story because it's so funny. This is the number one, because you can see what your opponent really wants to use to try and attack you, because they can't help themselves. They're so intemperate. They have to go to it. It's like a go-to move. It's like a signature. It's like a guy who can only go
It's
right
like a rat going for cheese.
every time. You're 100K in back child support, you're a deadbeat. 100K in child support, you're a deadbeat. You're 100K in child support, the Daily Beast says you're a deadbeat. Let me take you back to when my first child was born. College, late night, 18 years old, one-time thing, complete accident, unplanned. I didn't even know the child was mine until 2 years into her life. Her mom thought that her father was somebody else. And that father woke up one day, I think, and asked for a DNA test, found out he wasn't the father, and she had to then retrace her steps to find out who the father really was. And we were all given, I was one of the people who was brought down to do a
Oh, you're
DNA
saying you
test.
were in a lineup.
I was. I was one of, I think, 3 other guys. I was one of 3 guys. And I ended up being the father. Now, when you look at my oldest daughter, you could tell right away. But I had never even seen her. So, I mean, I didn't even know. Now, because I was being drafted in the NBA, what do you think the family court decided? That I owed back child support.
Right.
Yeah, okay. And that I owed back child support not at a college or high school
Can I just say something?
salary.
Can I say something?
No, wait a second.
Well, no. You
No,
wait.
hold on, wait.
I want to say
No,
something.
wait a second.
I didn't hear. I just want to get this out.
Mhm.
I've never heard this story myself.
Okay.
So this is the first time
Okay.
the story has been.
Okay.
This is the part of the story that's never been told.
Yeah.
Okay, go
Okay.
ahead.
They don't back order child support at a college salary. They back order it at NBA salary. Okay. Then as you go forward, because you play in the NBA and it's public, right? And everything's about how things look in the public. Everything is based on public perception, not reality. So in the public, I was drafted to the NBA. I signed a contract, and I was to be making a lot of money, a salary that you can see on paper for each draft pick in the NBA. Each draft pick has a set amount. Because, of course, in the anti-competitive NBA, you can't sign open contracts with teams. They have a scale that helps them control the competition, access to entry. Set rookie scale salary, and I'm paying now every 2 weeks. I think it was like $2,400 every 2 weeks. Okay. $5,000 a month in child support. When I stopped getting checks, this went on for 2 years. This went on for 2 years when I was playing in Houston, and even though I was fighting with the NBA, and there was a time period where I wasn't getting paid because we were having this knockdown, drag out fight about mental health policy, which has now been changed. I've been greatly vindicated for the most part about the need for mental health policy in professional sports writ large, or in corporate America writ large. Now that's being weaponized, and I resent that. But nonetheless, while I was going through that fight, which the media never really wanted to admit then and still doesn't now because it's convenient, when I was going through that fight, there was a time in there where I got fined and didn't get paid. So the salary that was on paper actually wasn't the salary I received. Nonetheless, wouldn't have changed the monthly support payments because they only take 10% of your net income. So I was making like $20,000 every 2 weeks, and at 10% of that is $2,500 every two weeks. They know exactly where to go. They have access, court-ordered access, judge-granted access to go into your bank accounts. They have judge-granted access and get a court order to force your employer to pay to garnish your wages. But as soon as you lose your employment, the court expects that you file for a modification. That your change of employment status that they knew before, that they find easily anytime they need to, when they want to get money from you, they know exactly where to go and how to find your employment and your income to be able to garnish your wages. But as soon as you lose your employment, it's on you, the lost worker, to modify your support with the court. And I didn't even know that. At 21 years old, at 22 years old, I had no clue that I was expected to modify my support when I stopped getting checks from the NBA. In my mind, I thought, hey, I've been paying support for 2 years, and it's been paying a lot of support. I mean, $5,000 a month in child support is in the upper 1% of child support. You got to be a tech billionaire or millionaire or somebody that lives in California to have some exorbitant amount that's much more than that. I mean, that's a really high amount of child support for a month, for monthly support, right? Or unless it's a part of some marriage settlement agreement that's stipulated differently. For basic child support through the court,
there's a formula.
That's pretty high. That's as high as it gets because it's the highest tax. It's the highest income bracket. I had no clue that I was expected to modify the support, so I didn't modify the support. Do you think they called and said, "Hey, you don't have support. Where are your support payments?" Do you think that they called after the first 2 or 3 months where I wasn't making the support payment? And do you think they called the employer and said, "Hey, has Royce been terminated or is he no longer receiving checks?" No, they just let it accrue. $5,000 a month. So after 8 months of not being able to make that support payment, $60,000, the interest on it becomes so big that every month now you have an interest that is just as much as the support payment. So now it starts to double. And this is how I understand the way that interest works, like the interest on a $37 trillion national debt. We can't even pay the interest now. I understand that because I couldn't even pay the interest on the child support, which is how it ended up being $100,000. You understand?
Yes, sir.
And the point I'm making is that the Joe Frazier types, they'll just defend how the system works. That is their default, is how the system works is just fine. Nothing wrong with that. The mom needs help. The chick that works as a I don't know, she's a media person or consultant or campaign manager on the Frazier campaign. That's their line of thinking. You should have just paid. Why didn't you get a job and just pay? They actually, when they say that, they don't realize the insult it is to the American working class and how hard it actually is to find employment in general, much less fruitful employment or employment that actually can meet the demand of the inflationary economy we live in. So when you say you want to solve the debt issue and you're worried about inflation, but then you turn around and you shit on the working class citizens, aren't you revealing exactly who you are? You don't care about the working class. You don't care about the workers. You don't care about the working man.
You care about the system.
You care about the system. You assume that everybody is able to get adequate employment to meet the demand of the inflationary economy, which there is no evidence of. Again, you have a religious fairy tale view of the government and the system.
Of the country.
Of the world.
Of the multipolar world that we're now living in.
Yes. And I could take a small issue just like the child support and show you how people respond and be able to illustrate where the contradiction is. This is what politicians should be able to do.
That's really interesting from the perspective that it's not what people don't know that hurts them, it's what they think they know that ain't so that hurts them. And what you're saying is we got a lot of people in important positions that think a bunch of things that aren't grounded in reality. And that's dangerous for everybody. And what I'm taking from your presentation of these facts, which I've never heard before, which I've said on my own social media that half the story's never been told. I just didn't know the story was quite this interesting. Is that this little story about, because it's a personal story. This story of the child support is indicative of the whole failure of everything. That I am divorced. I have a judgment from the family court that's been choking me out. And I've been struggling for 10 years with this judgment. And I'm not going to say it ruined me because I'm optimistic and faithful, so I don't let it ruin me. But it's really, if I thought about my life in terms of money, I'm ruined. But I don't think about my life that way. I think about my life in the search for truth. So I don't really think about the money part of it, but the family court hamstrung me. And I can't go, just like you, I didn't go back in to go get it adjusted. So it's just the way it is. It's just an unfair system that people suffer under. They labor under it. They struggle under it. And then people use their struggle against them to support a system that's unjust from the get-go. That's injustice. And then the people that use that injustice to put other people down, they're, in my opinion, not very good people. Maybe not very smart people. They're lacking something. I don't know what, speak about this one woman in particular. This woman's calling you an anti-Semite.
Right.
I mean, this really, here we are, HEBROES. This woman doesn't know you. There's real anti-Semitism. There's real danger for some Jewish people. And then we got a dingbat like this using that like a cudgel. It's the same person using the deadbeat dad thing, which is unfair, doesn't have the facts, talking about anti-Semitism. This use of invectives to put people down because we don't like their political philosophies, all over the country, whatever state you're in, you're going to find this. There's going to be a neocon candidate and a person that's interested in American citizenship. And rest assured, they're going to be saying terrible things. When I say they, the people in that neocon camp will be putting down, running down, undermining, using everything but policy.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to talk about policy. They don't want any logic. They don't want that. We're never going to talk about policy because you're not worth talking about policy.
Gossip politics. That's what they do.
The top politics of bullshit is what it is.
Right.
And I think the American people are
had a belly full of it.
Well, I think they're starting to wake up from
They've
it.
had a belly full of it. They're sick of it.
I'm sick of it.
And that's why it was endorsed. And now they have to try and make sure. Now their goal is to make sure that the people of Minnesota, let's say, the Republican primary voters, who I wouldn't be surprised to see a serious influx of Democrat operatives by the tens of thousands that cross over in that primary because Amy Klobuchar
has no competition.
Has no competition.
Right.
And they're doing that to try and ensure that a broader brush of American citizens don't get a chance to hear me talk about real policy.
Great. So that's why
their goal.
Every American citizen needs to go to the primary poll on polling day
Yep.
and vote. Because really, what's the real? This is my read of the real scam here. Mm-hmm. These people, the Norm Colemans, the Julia Colemans, the people that are the Michelle Bensons, they know that Joe Frazier doesn't have a snowball's chance in hell of beating Amy Klobuchar. But as we heard from Republican operatives, it'd be a shame if anybody ran against Amy Klobuchar because she's so good for the state. Either way, they win. When I say they, solid votes for war. That's who Amy is. Amy is a solid vote for this. She talks about women's health care. She talks about all the. That's just getting votes. What she does is, I got a picture of. Did you get that picture of her standing there in the Ukraine with McCain and Lindsey Graham?
Of course.
Right. I mean, talk about strange. They say politics makes strange bedfellows. No, those people are the same guy. That's the same person. John McCain, Lindsey Graham, Amy Klobuchar, Joe Frazier. They're all the same. When it comes down to what matters, which is fueling the machine. There was a great American diplomat and historian. His name was George Kennan. George Kennan lived 100 years. He's a case study in brilliance. He wrote a letter, a cable from Moscow to the U.S. State Department when he was diplomatically stationed in Moscow during the Truman administration, which became the cornerstone of what became the containment policy, that Soviet expansionism had to be contained. Kennan went into the university life and fought against American foreign policy for the rest of his life because he recognized that our entire culture had been weaponized by these neocons. And what he said about Russia was, when the Soviet Union came apart and NATO started to incur into Eastern Europe and threaten the Russians, he said, this is the greatest foreign policy era in the post-Cold War period that If Russia disappeared under the ocean tomorrow, the American military-industrial complex would continue in search of an enemy that it would have to invent because the American economy could never take the shock of peace. And that's why these people are all united against the America First movement. They're all united against peace because everything our country does is wound into the weapons of war. And I just don't want that anymore. I mean, I've lived through this. I mean, I was almost draft age during the Vietnam War. I missed it by just a little bit. In my entire life, I've watched our country continuously be in war, back wars, overturn governments, appropriate more and more to war. We live in an empire, and that's not America. We've been hijacked by an ideology which is a contradiction to what the country was founded about. I have had a belly full of it. So American citizens, please, whatever state you're in, if you're in Minnesota, find out your primary date. Here in Minnesota, it's August 13th. This is a special year. People don't vote in these primaries. They don't care. But this year, hey, we got to care. Because if this continues to metastasize, they'll kill us. Because they're so divorced from reality, they actually think the Russians are like us, that the Russians won't fight to defend their country. And they will. And Putin is telling us that he will, and we're ignoring him. We're ignoring him. We're just ignoring him. We're ignoring him because the people that run our country are tripped out. They're living in America and with the idea of American hegemony, which no longer exists, in large part because we've exported all of our manufacturing, not all of it, but at least half of it, we've exported to other countries. So we can't even produce the things we, like the tire business. Tireget.com, hey, that's our sponsor. We love that sponsor. And I'm in the tire business. And I'm going to tell you right now, half the tires that we use in this country aren't made in this country. So if there's a breakdown of international supply, get your walking shoes on because you're going to be walking. Oh, and by the way, going down to the grocery store, there won't be any truck tires to bring the food to market. That's the reality we're living in.
Mm.
But our leaders are pretending in their mind like it's 1946, that we're large and in charge, that we're the only intact economy in the world, that we have the industrial base, we got the nuclear bomb to ourselves. We're hegemonic. I think that's the manufactured consent of which you speak. But why does it work? Because it's great to be a cuck sitting behind a computer
Yes.
with no accomplishments,
Yes.
no skills, can't run, can't dance, can't sing. But you're part of the greatest country on earth.
And to that point, they say online, you shouldn't. A United States senator shouldn't use the word cuck.
That's a should statement.
That makes you unserious as a candidate. No, it doesn't.
That's very serious.
It's the American cuckery is the most serious thing in American history. It's the most grave thing in American history.
The undermining of
citizenship.
Yeah.
And the reason I use cuckery as an example is because oftentimes you'll see these sort of perverse sexual relationships, unfold with people who have usually been together a long time, or some long-term relationship, or sometimes it happens relatively early in relationships. But there is a sort of cuck fetish, which is funny. I can't use the word cuck, but we got people in the White House who are promoting drag story hour for kids at the elementary school, but I can't use the word cuck. The contradiction is almost unbelievable. It's almost, if I wasn't witnessing it with my own eyes. But the thing with the cuck fetish, or the cuck dynamic,
the cuck lifestyle,
the cuck phenomena.
We finally got to a HEBROES moment. That, for my generation, this kind of thing is really inconceivable. My generation, inconceivable.
No, it's not.
No, well then for me,
okay.
Inconceivable.
Okay, but the cuck phenomenon is really something like this. That these men, these more
You're using that word rather loosely, aren't you?
these more effeminate beta type men are so in love, dependent on,
Codependent.
yes, codependent on romance and intimacy that they're willing to let their women break the traditional expectations of monogamous relationship to fulfill their own sexual desires. And the story that they tell themselves is, or the story that's told, or the way that it's explained often, as I've read about and seen and been there to hear for myself, certain instances, um, that women justify it to the men by saying, well, I love you, but I need, extra sexual gratification. And the men in compliance go, hey, well, I understand that you love me, and so I'm going to allow you to engage in this extra sexual gratification, uh, to maintain the overall health of the relationship.
Sounds very healthy.
And the reason I use that as an analogy or metaphor for American citizenry is because she doesn't love you. It's a lie. It's if it is love, it's not the love that you started off defining love as. It's a working definition of love, which is fine. I get it. Relationships go through ups and downs, and the definition of love carries all the history with it, so it can change. I get that, but that's pretty egregious. I mean, it's just kind of a breach of a natural boundary that has been in existence since time immemorial for hominids. Okay, and
Almost hardwired. Almost
it's actually reversal. And if you look back throughout history, the lack of monogamy was more tilted in the direction of men. So you could actually look at the cuck phenomenon as a rejection of thousands-year-old natural organization of Homo sapiens, right? Because more often than not, it'd be one man with multiple women because one man can impregnate multiple women, not the reverse, right? I mean, that's just I mean, the polygamy was always tilted in the direction of one man with multiple women because of the nature,
almost all the
because
time.
of the biological nature. It was purely biological. One man can impregnate more than one woman. Simple biology. So not only did we go to monogamy, now we've had a reverse polygamy where women are with one man who's the provider, and he's still expected to be the financial, economic, and physical provider.
I think you should go fight in Ukraine too.
Absolutely. But I need a couple of extra sexual partners because of whatever sexual gratification that I'm missing, which most often isn't probably sexual gratification even. It's probably some other weird psychosomatic kind of
Fuckery.
twisted thing that's going on that's being projected onto the sexual when it's really about something completely different. But my point is, she doesn't love you. And I won't even go as far as say that. She may love you, but that is not to preserve the love. That's a lie. Okay? It's the same thing our government does to us. And my whole point in talking about the cuck phenomenon is that American citizens who know better, who know something's wrong, who know they're being lied to, they like the convenience so much they're willing to accept the lie.
That's very important. How can you get that into a short bit?
There's no short bit. I'm working on it.
You got to get that into a one-liner.
I got to get it down to a 1
That's
minute.
a one-liner.
I got to get it down to a 60-second because that's the only way people listen
because
to shit
all
these
the
days.
people that are picking on you online because of the use of a
They
word.
know their government's lying to them. Their government's telling them, we love you. We want to
help you.
We want it to be global citizenship. We want to have a great working
We want to have
relationship
peace.
where we give you prosperity and well-being. We want to serve your interests. We want to represent you. We want a multicultural, peaceful world. We want you to have a meaningful life.
No matter who you are.
We want
no
you to
matter
be able
what
to
you
explore your
whatever
inner freedoms, your inner personality, your truth.
Who you are.
We want you to be you until it's time to take a vaccine, until it's time to be a Christian, until it's time to vote for Donald Trump. until it's time to be a black man who doesn't want to be a Democrat, until it's time to do any of these number of things that are on the sort of naughty list, then we don't want you to have your own truth.
Gulag.
You have to have our truth. People know that there's something wrong with it, yet they still accept it. Just like a man who knows, and we both, divorce is expensive. Divorce is expensive. Family court is treacherous because the courts overwhelmingly tilt in the direction of women because men, in at least a jurisprudential sense, are still seen as having to be the providers.
Historically.
So there is no equality between men and women in the marriage or family court.
Or in the court of the draft.
There you go.
Oh.
So
as soon as things get weaponized, advantage
women. Men.
What happened to equality?
There is no equality. Men often will accept this perverse sexual request just because they don't want to have to go through the rigors of getting divorced. And in that way, women sort of fetishize their men, and they sort of corrupt their men into some weird kabuki relationship out of fear of the state. And this is how the state can actually corrupt people from the top down, through policy. Just like inflation. There's a corruptibility in everyday romantic relationships from the top down, from the state down. Or, you could say it.
Slow down. Are you saying that the state, the fear
has
that
created
men have
cuckery,
actually
incentivize a cuck phenomenon?
Well, now we're getting into a problem, aren't we? There's a logical.
Not for Joe Frazier.
No, but there's a logical.
Joe Frazier defends that system. And he kind of looks like a cuck, too, if you're asking me. I say that with all due respect and no evidence whatsoever.
No fucking respect. Let me tell you something.
But I'm saying.
After the thing, everybody brought, I have to say this. It's kind of a strange form for saying it.
Okay.
But after the endorsement,
mm-hmm.
which was a great hype that lasted, 15 seconds,
mm-hmm.
all this stuff started to pour out about Royce White. And I'm thinking to myself, military intelligence. You mean all this shit was public record and you were so fucking smart, Joe, that you didn't look up anything about your opponent before the convention? Wow. You're either arrogant or stupid or both. And we're going to you got to go to the polls, Minnesota, on August 13th, or this dumb, arrogant son of a bitch could end up losing Amy Klobuchar, who's going to get us killed. I have 5 children and a stepchild. I'd like them to live. Now, if we don't get serious about our politics, there's a submarine and some Russian warships off Miami today. Putin is saying, hey, guess what, fuckers? You're not getting a free pass on this. You're killing my people over here with your weapons, and you're telling me to accept it?
And I'm supposed to be, and I'm supposed to be the stupid or crazy one because I don't want to fly to Tampa Bay with a Russian nuclear submarine off of the Miami coast. Way to go, guys. This is the society we've created.
We've created a lot of contradictions to work here.
Oh, it's been another episode of Please Call Me Crazy. I want to thank the great Professor Penn for coming in the studio with us again. We got to do another HEBROES episode sooner than later. It's been too long.
Yeah, maybe you'll let me talk next time.
You got a long time.
You were fantastic. Hey, we got a future senator here. He needs to talk, and we need to listen to a new generation of leaders. You got to go to the polls.
You didn't have the heralded New York Times and Axios write a bunch of hit pieces, so I felt I needed to clarify a few positions.
You do,
especially around the $100,000 child support debt, and the use of the word cuck is top on their list. Don't need to talk about policy, although we talked a little bit about policy.
We got to get into the policy,
and we'll do policy next time. We'll just whiteboard the issues.
But the people that are listening, half.
But we can't even talk about policy until we get past the mud on top.
Well, the whole point of putting the mud on there is so we never talk about the policy.
That's true.
They're slinging mud so we can't. American citizens, make your list of 20 friends and family, neighbors, co-workers. Start talking to people about your politics.
Yeah.
Everybody that's listening in here is listening for a reason. Yeah. There's entertainment, but hey, we're a political action community. Thanks for having me on.
I appreciate it, and we appreciate everybody out there in the audience. We hope you enjoyed another episode of HEBROES. Be sure to tune in tomorrow morning for Real America's Voice, the Royce White Show before Steve Bannon and the War Room. And we want to send a special shout out to the entire War Room posse, Grace Chong, Maureen Bannon, the great Steve Bannon. Maureen Bannon will be joining me this weekend in Tampa Bay, Florida, as the War Room has given away a special promo code for War Room posse members who are going to be in the Florida, Tampa Bay area that want to come watch Big 3 action tomorrow.
Wow.
So that's going to be fun, and special thank you and prayers and well wishes to the great Steve Bannon. I'm not sure what's going to happen here in the next week or two before he's been ordered to jail by a kangaroo court. And now even MSNBC is gloating about him having to serve potentially with violent criminals in an open-air prison. And I think Charlie Kirk said it best. I think they're trying to kill him. You know, they're dog whistling to be able to have him killed. They're trying to get people comfortable with the idea that he's going to be in. Not only did they say violent offenses, but sexual. They mentioned sexual offenders, right? I mean, why would they even say that? And again, and before we go, this is how you know these people have no real interest in criminal justice reform. They have no real position on the broken prison system or criminal justice system that we have in this country. They're just using it like everything else. And as soon as it becomes a mechanism to tyrannize their political opponents, they're all good with it. They like it. They brag about it. They can't wait. They can't. They think it's some form of justice that Donald Trump would have to serve in the same broken prison system that somehow he helped create with his white supremacy. That is a true lack of sacred honor and moral center. One of the most ugliest things I've ever even conceived of. I've never even read about something so corrupt. The fact that it's true, the fact that it's stranger than fiction makes it even more corrupt.
And Peter Navarro is in jail for the same thing right now, and they shackled him. He was shackled.
Right. For
shackled.
A nonviolent offense.
Shackled, a la the slave period. Right. I mean, it really was it's unconscionable. Right. Unconscionable. And every American citizen get to the polls, because guess what? When Donald Trump says they're trying to get to you through me, he ain't kidding. And I can tell you as a civilian that's now out in the front lines myself, we're all at risk here. And I applaud you, Royce, for not bending the knee to tyranny. We need more leaders like you that will not bend the knee to tyranny. It's tyranny.
Not a single back step.
I like that one.
Not a single back step.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, appreciate you, brother. We'll do it again next week. Everybody out there, we appreciate your time. We appreciate your viewership and listenership today and in the future. Again, make sure you tune in to Real America's Voice tomorrow morning, Monday through Friday, the John Frederick Radio Network, 9 p.m. Eastern, for the Royce White Radio Show, and Professor Penn's podcast on Tuesday, Thursdays at 7:30 p.m. Central Time, which you can now watch streamed on my X as well as the YouTube channel. But make sure you go and subscribe and like the YouTube episodes as well.
We're getting a good audience on your channel. Thank you very much, Royce. Thank you.
Yeah, the X is doing well. So we appreciate it. See you next week.